HoneyKomb Brazy, from viral fame to a fire that took everything to a federal sale and back home, here's the whole story. In the fall of 2025, a short video started spreading across the internet. A young man in a white van stepping out into daylight, swarmed by a crowd of people who had waited for this moment. After nearly 2 years behind bars, HoneyKomb Brazy was going home. But to understand why that clip meant so much, you have to go back to a viral come up and to the night a fire took the two people he loved most. This is the story of Nashawn Jones, the rapper the world knows as HoneyKomb Brazy. It is a story about how fast fame can arrive in the streaming era and how quickly everything around it can burn. It's about a Facebook post, a house in Mobile, Alabama, and a chain of violence that reached the people who had nothing to do with any of it. Before we begin, a few important notes. HoneyKomb Brazy pleaded guilty to a federal firearm charge that is a matter of record. But several men charged in the killing of his grandparents have not been convicted of those murders, and everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. We name the people accused only as reporting and court filings describe them, and we're here to honor the victims, not to sensationalize their loss. He came up in Mobile, Alabama, in a neighborhood called Happy Hill, a name that carried more irony than comfort. Money was short, the streets were close, and for a kid with a fast mouth and faster ideas, music was one of the only exits in sight. Long before the world knew the name, Nashawn Jones was just another young man from the Gulf Coast trying to be heard. In 2018, that changed almost overnight. A track simply called Freestyle and the raw, high-energy video that came with it went viral. There were no big label machines behind it, no radio push. It was just him, the delivery, the confidence, the realness that fans in his city already knew. The numbers climbed, the clip spread, and suddenly HoneyKomb Brazy was a name people outside Alabama were saying out loud. What set him apart was that he sounded like exactly where he came from. He rapped about his life, the losses, the loyalty, the weight of the neighborhood, with a kind of urgency you couldn't fake. To his fans, he wasn't performing the streets, he was reporting from them. And that authenticity is the thing that built his following faster than any marketing plan ever could. By 2020, the industry was paying attention. The legendary music executive Jay Prince, the man behind Rap-A-Lot Records, signed him. For a young artist out of Mobile, that was the cosign of a lifetime, a stamp from one of the most respected names in rap. On paper, the dream was arriving right on schedule. The music kept coming, the fan base kept growing, and for a moment it looked like a straightforward success story, a kid who bet everything on his own voice and won. But the same neighborhood conflicts that fueled his music were still very much alive off the record. And in the streaming era, a rivalry doesn't stay in the booth. It travels on phones, in comments, on social media. What should have been the beginning of a long career instead became the setup for the worst night of his life, because in February of 2021, the violence that lived in the background of his music came crashing into the one place that was supposed to be safe. On February 17th, 2021, in the Happy Hill neighborhood of Mobile, investigators say two gunmen opened fire on a family home. Round after round tore into the house. The couple inside were not rappers, not rivals, not part of anyone's beef. They were an older man and woman, HoneyKomb Brazy's grandparents. Their names were Tony Lewis, 62 years old, and Leila Lewis, 68. They were the kind of grandparents who anchor a family, the house everyone comes back to. On that night, according to investigators, Tony was struck by gunfire inside their home. What happened next turned an already unthinkable crime into something even more devastating. Inside the home were several oxygen tanks. Investigators say the gunfire ignited them, and the house went up in flames. The fire destroyed the home, damaged a neighboring house, and claimed Leila's life. Two people who had done nothing were gone in a matter of minutes, and a quiet street in Mobile would never be the same. Mobile police opened a homicide investigation almost immediately. At first, to the public, it looked like a tragic house fire, but witnesses described gunfire before the flames, and detectives quickly came to believe this was no accident. It was, they suspected, a targeted attack, and the question that would drive the entire case was simple and chilling: why them? The answer that emerged in court testimony pointed to something almost impossibly small. According to investigators, the violence traced back to a post on Facebook, a message from another mobile-connected rapper, HoneyKomb, that was said to have disrespected the wrong people. To be clear, HoneyKomb has not been charged in these deaths, but detectives testified that his online words allegedly lit the fuse for what followed. Here is the part that has haunted this case ever since. Investigators say that people seeking revenge could not reach their actual targets. They couldn't get to HoneyKomb Brazy. They couldn't get to HoneyKomb. So prosecutors alleged they settled for who they could reach, and that meant two grandparents asleep in their own home. If that account is true, Tony and Leila Lewis died for a conflict they had no part in. Over the months that followed, investigators built a case, and arrest came. 4 men were ultimately charged in connection with the murders: Terrence Watkins, Jamarcus Chambers, Patrick Lewis, and a man authorities described as a drug kingpin, Darren Southall. Prosecutors alleged that Southall directed the attack and that the others carried it out. All of them are presumed innocent of the murder charges unless and until the court proves otherwise. According to court testimony, federal wiretaps, recordings gathered in a separate drug investigation, helped tie the accused men to the killings. It was one of those cases where two worlds collided, a federal narcotics probe and a local double homicide, connected by the same names and the same phones. Investigators say the tapes captured the coordination behind the attack. The legal fallout has been complicated. Darren Southall is already serving a 35-year sentence on drug and escape convictions he pleaded guilty to. Jamarcus Chambers received roughly 11 years in federal prison on related charges. But those sentences came largely from the drug side of the investigation. As for the murders of Tony and Leila Lewis themselves, the road to a final verdict has been long, slow, and painful for a family still waiting on justice. For HoneyKomb Brazy, the loss was public and personal at once. The grandparents who helped raise him were gone, killed in a war of words he was connected to. He grieved in the only language he really had, his music, and fans watched an artist known for toughness carry a wound that no amount of success could cover. But grief and fame together can be a dangerous mix. In the years after the murders, Brazy's own legal troubles mounted. He was placed on probation, and prosecutors accused him of violating it, pointing, among other things, to firearms that appeared in his music videos. For an artist whose whole brand was authenticity, the line between the image and the law was thin, and Alabama prosecutors were watching closely. Then, on December 18th, 2023, the federal government stepped in. HoneyKomb Brazy was arrested and charged as a felon in possession of a firearm. Prosecutors alleged that during a traffic stop, he was within arm's reach of an assault-style rifle while traveling with a security detail. For a man with a prior record, that single allegation carried the weight of years. In July of 2024, rather than gamble on a trial, HoneyKomb Brazy pleaded guilty to the federal firearm charge. It was an admission that closed one chapter and opened another, a plea deal that would shape how much time he actually served. The dream that had started with a viral video was now moving through federal court. At his sentencing early 2025, a different HoneyKomb Brazy spoke. He told the court he wanted to do right, to be there for his children, to be more than the headlines. The judge handed down a federal sentence measured in months rather than years, thanks in part to the plea. For the first time in a long time, there was a light at the end of it. But the federal case was never the only threat hanging over him. Back on the state side, his probation violation carried a far heavier number. Reports pointed to a possible 13.5-year sentence if it went the wrong way. It was a reminder that for someone in his position, freedom is fragile, and one ruling can undo years of progress. And yet, in the fall of 2025, the news came that his fans had been praying for. After serving his federal time, HoneyKomb Brazy was released, walking out to that crowd in the video that spread across the internet. Nearly 2 years after the arrest, the young man from Happy Hill was going home. So what does that leave him? Free, but not clear. He returned to a music career that never stopped waiting, to children who need him, and to a city that both made him and marked him. The questions now are the hard ones. Can he stay out? Can he turn the loss into something lasting? And will the family of Tony and Leila Lewis ever get the full justice they've been waiting years to see? Whatever comes next for HoneyKomb Brazy, this story was never really about the music. It was about two people who were loved, Tony Lewis and Leila Lewis, grandparents who paid the highest price for a conflict that was never theirs. We remember them. And we'll keep following this case until it reaches its end. We'll keep following this story as it develops. Rest in peace to Tony and Leila Lewis. This has been CrimeTownTV.